He looked at his watch, 8:44, 16 minutes to the interview that would save his life. Then he looked at the woman stranded beside the silver Lexus, white steam billowing from under the hood like a distress signal nobody else could see. 246 cars had already passed her. He knew because he'd been car number 247, and guilt had counted every second of his cowardice before he turned around. The rain in Portland didn't just fall that Thursday morning. It erased the world in sheets of gray, turning Interstate 84 into a river of brake lights and desperation. Declan Reed gripped the steering wheel of his 2013 Ford Escape, ignoring the check engine light that had been glowing for 3 weeks, ignoring the transmission that clunked every time he shifted into third, ignoring everything except the numbers on the dashboard clock. 8:45. 15 minutes. His daughter's voice echoed in his head from breakfast an hour ago, high and hopeful, despite the oatmeal they'd eaten for the 4th day straight. "Daddy, when you get the new job, can we have pizza on Friday?" He'd smiled the smile he'd perfected over 2.5 years of single fatherhood, the one that said everything would be fine when his bank account screamed otherwise. "Maybe next week, sweetheart." Iris had looked at him with those hazel eyes that saw through every lie, every false promise, every desperate attempt to shield her from the reality of their situation. "You said that last week, too." 7 years old. Type 1 diabetes. Insulin that cost $220 a month when insurance decided, as they had 3 days ago, that her prescription was no longer covered under preventive care. The pharmacy had been kind enough to give him a 2-week emergency supply. After that, he'd have to choose between rent and keeping his daughter alive. The interview at Meridian Global Industries wasn't just an opportunity. It was oxygen. Operations director. Base salary $95,000. Benefits that included prescription coverage with a $5 copay. Signing bonus of $10,000 that would let him pay the landlord 6 months in advance and stop the eviction proceedings that had already reached final notice. Declan had practiced his responses in the bathroom mirror while Iris slept, whispering his credentials to his own tired reflection. "I managed a $50 million supply chain at Vertex Corporation for 8 years. Reduced operational costs by 18% year over year. Built a predictive analytics system that saved $12 million annually." What he didn't say, what he could never say in an interview, was why he'd left that world. Why a man with an MBA and a track record of excellence now worked as a warehouse logistics coordinator for $48,000 a year, checking inventory on a clipboard, while younger men with half his experience climbed ladders he'd once stood at the top of. Nora. Her name still carved a hole in his chest every time he thought it. Cancer hadn't killed her, though it had tried. Sepsis from a botched surgery had finished what the tumor started, flooding her system with infection, while doctors argued over liability and insurance companies delayed approvals for treatments that might have saved her. 8 months of watching her fade. 8 months of choosing between his wife and his career. The choice had been easy. Living with the consequences had not. The medical bills still arrived, ghosts of a death that cost $94,000 and counting. 8:46. 14 minutes. The Lexus appeared through the rain like a mirage, hazard lights pulsing weak orange against the downpour. Silver paint luxury sedan, probably worth more than Declan made in a year. The woman standing beside it wore a beige trench coat soaked through, holding a phone to her ear with one hand, while the other gestured helplessly at the steam pouring from under the hood. Declan's foot hovered over the accelerator. Every rational part of his brain screamed the same thing. "Not your problem. Someone else will call it in. You have Iris to think about. You have rent due in 2 days. You have $89.17 in your checking account." He drove past. The speedometer climbed. 65, 70. The woman disappeared in his rearview mirror, just another stranger's crisis in a world full of them. Then Nora's voice cut through the rain, and the logic and the fear as clear as if she were sitting in the passenger seat beside him. "Deck promised me something. If Iris ever needs help, really needs it, you'd want someone to stop. Wouldn't you?" She'd said it 3 days before she died, lucid for the first time in a week, her hand cold in his. He'd promised. Of course he'd promised. What else could a man say to his dying wife? The woman in the trench coat looked exactly like his mother had looked in the hospice 20 years ago. Scared, alone, trying to be brave while the world rushed past. Declan's jaw clenched. His hands tightened on the wheel until his knuckles went white. "Damn it!" He checked his blind spot and swerved hard across 2 lanes, earning a symphony of angry horns. His rear tires caught the shoulder gravel, fishtailing slightly before he regained control. He threw the Escape into reverse and backed up along the narrow strip of asphalt until his bumper aligned with the Lexus. 8:47. 13 minutes. The math was simple. 5 minutes to make sure she had help coming. 8 minutes to reach downtown Portland. 4 minutes to sprint from the parking garage to the Meridian Global building. He could still make it. He had to make it. Declan grabbed the umbrella from behind his seat and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit him, first November rain that felt like needles against his skin. He was wearing the charcoal suit he'd bought 10 years ago for his wedding, the fabric pulling slightly across his shoulders because he'd put on muscle-working warehouse shifts. The white shirt underneath had been ironed 3 times to get the creases right. The shoes were polished to a shine that wouldn't last 5 seconds in this weather. He looked for the first time in 2.5 years like the man he used to be. The woman jumped when he tapped on her window, fear flashing across her face before she registered the umbrella, the suit, the attempt at a reassuring smile. She rolled the window down an inch. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Her voice came out shaky, strained. "My phone died right when AAA answered. I was trying to restart it, but there's smoke everywhere and I don't know anything about cars and—" He raised a hand, gentle. "It's okay. Pop the hood. Let me take a look." She hesitated and Declan understood. He was a big man, 6'2", and broad, showing up out of nowhere on a deserted stretch of highway. Stranger danger wasn't paranoia when you were alone and vulnerable. "I'm late for a meeting," he said, trying to sound calm despite his heart hammering against his ribs. "But I can't leave you here. I'm Declan. Just let me see if it's something simple." Something in his voice must have convinced her, or maybe she was desperate enough not to care. The hood latch clicked. Declan wrestled the hood up and steam hit him in the face, smelling sickeningly sweet. Coolant. He waved it away and leaned over the engine block, trying to remember the mechanical knowledge he'd picked up from his father 3 decades ago. The radiator hose had burst, split clean through. Green fluid sprayed across the engine, hissing on hot metal. The car wasn't going anywhere without a tow truck and a repair shop. He leaned back down to the window. "It's a blown radiator hose. You're not driving this today." The woman put her head in her hands, and for a moment Declan thought she might cry. "I have to be at a board meeting at 9:30. This is a disaster." 8:48, 12 minutes. "Can you use my phone?" The words came out before he could stop them, before logic could intervene. "Call your office. Let them know what happened." He patted his jacket pocket, then his pants pocket. The sinking feeling started in his stomach and spread like poison. His phone wasn't there. Declan turned and ran back to his car, fumbling for the door handle. As he pulled it open, an 18-wheeler roared past in the left lane, hitting a massive puddle that had formed in the depression between lanes. The wall of water rose like a tsunami, brown and thick with road oil. Declan saw it coming, had half a second to process what was about to happen, and then it hit him square in the back with the force of a linebacker's tackle. Cold exploded through his body. The water soaked through his suit jacket, through his dress shirt, through his undershirt to his skin. It ran down his pants, filled his shoes, dripped from his hair into his eyes. The smell was overwhelming, a cocktail of diesel and dirt and chemical runoff that made his stomach turn. He stood there for 3 seconds, feeling the water pool in his shoes, feeling 2.5 years of carefully maintained dignity wash away in a single moment. His phone sat on the center console where he'd left it, plugged into the charger, completely dry and utterly useless to his current situation. Declan grabbed it and walked back to the Lexus, each step producing a squelching sound from his ruined shoes. Water dripped from the hem of his jacket. Mud splattered up his pant legs in abstract patterns that looked like Rorschach tests designed to measure despair. He held the phone through the window gap. The woman stared at him and something in her expression shifted. Not pity exactly. Recognition maybe of the kind of sacrifice she was watching unfold in real time. "You're completely soaked." He forced a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Hazard of the job." She took the phone with trembling fingers and dialed. "Margaret, it's Vivian. Yes, complete failure. I'm on Interstate 84 eastbound, mile marker 170. Send the car now." A pause. "And call Henderson. Tell him to stall the board meeting. I'll explain later." She handed the phone back and her eyes really looked at him for the first time. Took in the ruined suit, the water still dripping from his nose, the desperation he was trying so hard to hide. "You said you were late for a meeting. What kind of meeting? The truth felt too pathetic to speak aloud, but lying seemed worse somehow. Job interview, Meridian Global Industries, 9 o'clock. Her eyes widened just slightly. If Declan hadn't been watching her face, he would have missed it. That's a good company. You should go. My driver will be here in 8 minutes. You've done enough. 8:50. 10 minutes. Declan looked down at himself. The suit was destroyed mud and water stains that no dry cleaner in the world could resurrect. His shirt clung to his chest, transparent enough to show the undershirt beneath. His shoes made wet sounds with every movement, even if he drove like a maniac, even if traffic parted like the Red Sea, even if he sprinted from the parking garage and arrived exactly at 9, breathless and desperate. He would walk into that interview looking like he'd been sleeping under a bridge. No one hired homeless-looking men for director-level positions at Fortune 500 companies. He'd already lost the job. He just hadn't accepted it yet. I can't leave you alone on the highway. The words came out stubborn, and some distant part of Declan's brain that still functioned logically screamed at him to shut up, get in the car, drive away, salvage what little remained of this catastrophe. The woman shook her head, and now there were tears in her eyes. Please, you've already sacrificed too much. I'll be safe, I promise. Just go. Through the rain, Declan saw headlights approaching, a black Mercedes sedan moving carefully along the shoulder. Her rescue had arrived. Are you sure? She nodded, and her voice came out thick with emotion. Thank you. I don't even know your name. Declan. Declan Reed. Thank you, Declan Reed. I hope your interview goes well. She didn't believe it would. He could see it in her eyes, the knowledge that she'd just watched a man destroy his future to help a stranger. Declan ran back to his car and threw himself into the driver's seat. Water pooled beneath him, soaking into the cloth seats. He started the engine, checked his mirrors, and pulled into traffic with a desperation that would have gotten him pulled over on any other day. The speedometer climbed past 80. The transmission screamed in protest, that clunking sound getting worse with every gear shift. His hands left wet prints on the steering wheel. 8:53. 7 minutes. The drive downtown became a blur of red lights run and yellow lights ignored. Other drivers honked, swerved, gestured angrily. Declan didn't care. Math had become his entire world, a simple equation that refused to balance. 10 miles. 7 minutes. Interstate 84 to the Morrison Bridge to 3rd Avenue to the Meridian Tower parking garage. He made it in 6.5. The parking attendant's face went through a journey when Declan pulled up. Confusion, disgust, carefully maintained professional neutrality. I'm here for an interview. Where do I park? The attendant pointed to level 3 without speaking, probably afraid of what might come out of his mouth if he opened it. Declan found a spot, killed the engine, and ran. The elevator to the lobby felt like it moved in slow motion, each floor ticking by with the speed of continental drift. When the doors finally opened, he burst through them at a full sprint, water flying from his shoes with each impact. The lobby of Meridian Global Industries looked like money incarnate. Marble floors, original art on the walls, a reception desk made of glass and steel that probably cost more than Declan's car. The receptionist looked up from her computer, saw him coming, and her expressions cycled through every shade of horror. He skidded to a stop in front of her desk, breathing hard, dripping on her marble floor. Declan Reed, 9 o'clock interview with Preston Blackwell. She stared at him like he'd just crawled out of a sewer, which wasn't far from the truth. Her manicured finger reached for the phone without breaking eye contact, as if she were afraid he might lunge across the desk. Mr. Blackwell, your 9 o'clock appointment is here. A pause, and her voice dropped to a stage whisper that Declan absolutely heard. Yes, well, you'll see. She hung up and pointed to the elevator bank. Floor 28, conference room B. Declan forced himself to walk, not run. Water squelched in his shoes with each step. Other employees in the lobby moved away from him, creating a buffer zone like he carried a contagious disease. The elevator was mirrored on all sides, forcing Declan to confront his reflection from every angle. His hair stood up in wet spikes. His face was pale dark circles under his eyes from too many nights lying awake calculating how to stretch $89 across 2 weeks. The suit looked like it had been retrieved from a dumpster. He looked like desperation personified. The 28th floor was all glass walls and minimalist design, the kind of space that made him remember the man he used to be. Corner office. Assistant. Expense account. The version of Declan Reed who wore suits because he owned 20 of them, not because he owned one. Conference Room B sat at the end of a long hallway. Through the glass walls he could see a man sitting at the head of a gleaming table, early 40s, perfect hair that looked like it had been assembled rather than grown, suit that probably cost $3,000. Expression of boredom mixed with contempt. Preston Blackwell. Declan walked in, leaving wet footprints on the carpet. Preston didn't stand, didn't offer a handshake, didn't look up from the file open in front of him. "You're late, Mr. Reed." The voice was smooth, cultured, the kind of accent that came from East Coast boarding schools and Ivy League universities. Every syllable dripped with the confidence of a man who'd never been desperate a day in his life. "I apologize. There was an emergency on the highway. A woman's car broke down and—" Preston's hand came up in a gesture that could have been directing traffic or swatting a fly. "Let me stop you right there." He finally looked up, and his eyes traveled slowly from Declan's dripping hair to his mud-stained shoes. The corner of his mouth twitched upward in something that wasn't quite a smile. "We are Meridian Global Industries. We represent excellence, precision, standards." He gestured vaguely at Declan's appearance with the pen in his hand. "This is not excellence. This is frankly insulting. Did you prepare for this interview at all, or did you just decide to show up looking like you slept in a drainage ditch?" Heat flooded Declan's face, a mixture of shame and rage that he swallowed down because he couldn't afford either emotion. "Sir, if you'd just look at my resume. I managed a $50 million supply chain at Vertex Corporation. 8 years, 0 safety incidents. I built a predictive analytics system that—" "I don't need to look at your resume." Preston's voice cut through Declan's desperation like a blade through paper. "I can see everything I need to see. You quit your last real position 2.5 years ago. You've been working as a warehouse coordinator since then, making what, $48,000 a year." He said the number like it was a disease. "Do you know what we pay our janitorial staff, Mr. Reed? $42,000. You're essentially one step above the people who empty our trash cans, and you walked in here thinking you were qualified to be operations director." The words landed like punches, each one finding a wound that hadn't quite healed. Declan's fists clenched at his sides, nails digging into his palms. "My wife was dying. I took care of her." The admission came out quiet, stripped of pride or defense. Just fact. Preston leaned back in his chair, and now his expression shifted to something that might have been sympathy if it hadn't been so obviously performative. "That's admirable, truly. But Mr. Reed, this is a business, not a charity. We can't hire someone based on tragic circumstances. We need professionals who can show up on time, dressed appropriately, ready to perform at the highest level." He closed the file in front of him with a definitive snap. "This interview is over. Please leave before I call security." Desperation clawed at Declan's throat, trying to force words out that he knew would only make things worse. "Please, I have a daughter. She needs medication. I need this job." Preston stood, and the movement was so smooth it looked choreographed. He walked to the door and held it open. "Everyone has a sob story, Mr. Reed. Everyone has bills to pay and children to feed and circumstances that make their life difficult. That doesn't entitle you to a position you're not qualified for." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried an edge sharp enough to draw blood. "And showing up looking like a homeless vagrant doesn't demonstrate the kind of judgment we're looking for in our leadership team. Now get out. You have 30 seconds before I call security and have you escorted from the building." Declan walked past him, and the humiliation of it felt like swallowing broken glass. The hallway stretched impossibly long, and every person he passed seemed to be staring, seemed to know exactly what had just happened behind that glass door. The elevator ride down felt like descending into hell. The lobby had filled with morning employees, all of them dressed in versions of the suits Declan used to wear, all of them moving with the confidence of people who had health insurance and retirement accounts and futures that extended beyond the end of the month. He made it to his car before the rage hit. His fist connected with the steering wheel once, twice, 3 times until his knuckles split and bled. The pain felt good, felt real, felt like something he could control in a world that kept spinning beyond his reach. The scream that came out of him was wordless, primal. Everything he couldn't say to Preston Blackwell, or the landlord, or the pharmacy, or the universe that kept taking and never giving back. When it passed, leaving him hollow and shaking, his phone buzzed. Text message from a number he recognized like a recurring nightmare. "Mr. Reed, this is your final notice. Rent due tomorrow by 5 p.m. or eviction proceedings begin Monday. No exceptions. Brennan landlord, reasonable man. Father of 3 who understood hardship but understood business more. The apartment was already listed for $800 more per month because Portland's rental market had gone insane and people with money were moving in from California, pricing out everyone who'd lived there for generations. Declan opened his banking app with hands that still trembled from adrenaline. The numbers stared back at him cruel and absolute. Balance $89.17. He needed $1,825 by 5 o'clock tomorrow. The math was simple. Impossible, but simple. He picked up Iris from after-school care at 4:30, and her smile when she saw him nearly broke what remained of his composure. She ran across the playground with her backpack bouncing, blonde hair streaming behind her like a flag of innocence in a world that had no time for innocence. "Daddy, did you get the job?" The question landed like a hammer to the chest. Declan arranged his face into the smile he'd perfected, the one that said everything would be fine when every cell in his body knew it wouldn't. "Not this one, Bug. But there are other opportunities." Iris stopped running, stopped smiling. Those hazel eyes that saw too much locked onto his face with an intensity that would have made lesser men confess to crimes they didn't commit. "You're doing the fake smile." The accusation hung in the air between them, too perceptive by half. "What do you mean?" "Miss Hartley says grown-ups do fake smiles when they're sad but don't want kids to worry. Your mouth goes up but your eyes stay sad." 7 years old. 7 years old, and she could read him better than anyone alive, including Nora. Especially including Nora toward the end when pain medication had clouded everything. Declan knelt down so they were eye level. "Things are a little tough right now, sweetheart. But Daddy's going to figure it out. I promise." Iris's small hand reached up and touched his face, and her voice came out smaller than it should have. "Are we going to lose our home?" The words punched the air from his lungs. How did she know he'd been so careful, so deliberate in shielding her from the reality of their situation? "No, I won't let that happen. Is that the truth or the thing you want me to believe?" Declan pulled her into a hug so she couldn't see his face, couldn't see the answer written in every line of it. "It's the thing I'm going to make true." Dinner was macaroni and cheese from a box the 3rd night that week. Iris ate without complaint, which somehow made it worse. A 7-year-old shouldn't have to develop that kind of stoicism. She should throw tantrums about wanting chicken nuggets. She should demand dessert and refuse to eat vegetables. Instead, she ate her mac and cheese and thanked him and went to do her homework without being asked. After she was in bed, after her blood sugar was checked and her insulin was administered and the nightlight was turned on, Declan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and the crushing weight of mathematics. Rent $1,825. Current balance $89.17. Shortfall $1,735.83. He opened Craigslist, searched for day labor jobs, found a listing for dock work loading trucks, 8 hours at $15 an hour, $120 if he survived it, which wasn't guaranteed, given that he hadn't done manual labor that intense in years. He called the number. The man who answered sounded like he gargled gravel for breakfast. "Yeah, we need guys tomorrow. 6 in the morning. You show up late, we move to the next person. Cash at end of shift." "I'll be there." $120. $108.17 total. Still $1,536 short. The pawnshop websites loaded slowly on his aging laptop. He inventoried everything he owned that might have value. The wedding ring was already gone, sold 6 months ago for grocery money. The television was 8 years old and worth maybe $50. His eyes landed on the watch box on his dresser. No, not that. Anything but that. Declan pulled out this box anyway, hands moving with a will separate from his conscious mind. Inside, nestled in velvet gone thin with age, was an Omega Seamaster from 1968. His father had given it to him at college graduation, and his father's father had given it to his father before that. "Time is the only thing you can't earn back, son. Spend it wisely." Those had been his father's last words before the heart attack took him 3 years later. The watch was worth maybe $800 to the right buyer. Maybe $1,000 if he got lucky. Still not enough. Declan's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, figuring it was another collections agency with a debt he couldn't pay. "Hello? Is this Declan Reed?" Woman's voice. Older. Familiar somehow, though he couldn't place it. "Yes. Who's this? This is Margaret Thorne. I'm the executive assistant for Vivian Marlowe, CEO of Meridian Global Industries. Declan's heart stopped. They were calling to threaten legal action for wasting their time, or maybe to officially ban him from the premises. He'd heard of companies doing that. I didn't mean to cause trouble. The interview didn't go well and I just... Mr. Reed. The voice cut through his babbling with professional efficiency. Ms. Marlowe would like to meet with you. Are you available tomorrow evening? The world tilted sideways. I'm sorry, what? Ms. Marlowe saw you this morning. She'd like to speak with you personally. Would 6 o'clock work? This had to be a joke, or a mistake, or Preston Blackwell's idea of psychological warfare setting him up for some new humiliation. Ma'am, I appreciate the call, but I think there's been some confusion. I interviewed with Preston Blackwell this morning. It didn't go well. I'm not qualified for... Mr. Blackwell does not make final hiring decisions. Ms. Marlowe does. 6 o'clock tomorrow. I'll text you the address. She hung up before Declan could respond. He stared at his phone like it had transformed into a snake. None of this made sense. CEOs of billion-dollar companies didn't personally interview failed candidates for director positions. They especially didn't call those candidates at 9 o'clock at night offering mysterious meetings. The text arrived 30 seconds later. An address in the Pearl District, Portland's most expensive neighborhood. Penthouses that sold for millions. Views of the Willamette River. The kind of place Declan used to dream about when he was climbing the corporate ladder back when climbing seemed possible. Iris's voice drifted from her bedroom, small and scared. Daddy! He was at her door in 3 seconds. What's wrong, Bug? I had a bad dream about Mommy. Declan sat on the edge of her bed and brushed hair from her forehead. Want to tell me about it? She was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't hear her. And then she was gone, and I was alone. The words cut deeper than Iris could possibly know. Declan pulled her into his arms, and she was so small, so fragile, so utterly dependent on a father who was failing her in every measurable way. You're not alone. You'll never be alone. I promise. Like you promised about the apartment. The question wasn't accusatory, just factual. 7 years old and already learning that promises were just words that grown-ups said things they couldn't guarantee. I'm going to fix this. Tomorrow might be really hard, but I'm going to fix it. She fell back asleep in his arms, and Declan sat there in the dark of her room, listening to her breathe, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his chest. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever this meeting with Vivian Marlowe was about, it couldn't be worse than losing his daughter's trust. It couldn't be worse than watching her learn that the world was cruel and fathers were powerless and hope was a luxury they couldn't afford. He carried her back to bed, tucked her in, checked her blood sugar one more time even though it was fine. Then he went back to the kitchen table and opened his laptop and started researching Vivian Marlowe, trying to understand what kind of woman personally reached out to a man who'd failed spectacularly to impress her company. The articles painted a picture of someone formidable. Built Meridian Global from a garage startup in 1989. Net worth $2.4 billion. Never married. No children. Quotes about dedication to the company that bordered on obsession. Recent articles mentioned her absence from quarterly earnings calls. Speculation about health issues. Rumors of succession planning. One photo caught Declan's attention. Vivian at a ribbon-cutting ceremony 3 years ago. The smile was professional, practiced, but her eyes held something else. Loneliness, maybe. Or the kind of exhaustion that came from carrying weight no one else could see. He recognized that look. He saw it in his mirror every morning. Declan closed the laptop and looked around his apartment. Cheap furniture from Goodwill, carpet worn thin in the high traffic areas, water stain on the ceiling from the leak upstairs that the landlord kept promising to fix. This was what his life had become, and tomorrow he'd load trucks for 8 hours to earn money that wouldn't save him, then drive to a penthouse to meet a billionaire for reasons he couldn't fathom. The absurdity of it all should have been funny, should have felt like the universe's idea of a cosmic joke. Instead, it felt like drowning in slow motion, watching the surface get further away with each passing second, knowing that eventually his lungs would give out and the water would win. Declan looked at his watch. Not the Omega in the box. The cheap Timex he'd bought at Target for $19. 11:43 p.m. In 6 hours and 17 minutes he'd be loading trucks. In 13 hours and 17 minutes he'd be meeting Vivian Marlowe. And somewhere in between, he'd have to find a way to believe that tomorrow could be different from today, that the universe might give back, instead of just taking that a man who stopped to help a stranger might receive help in return. Outside, the rain continued to fall on Portland, washing away the day's mistakes and tomorrow's promises with equal indifference. The alarm screamed at 5:15, dragging Declan from dreams where interviews went well and bank accounts had extra zeros. Reality crashed back in waves, the ache in his shoulders from sleeping wrong on a couch too short for his frame, the musty smell of the apartment's aging carpet, Iris's insulin pen waiting on the kitchen counter for her morning dose. He dressed in clothes meant for destruction. Jeans worn thin at the knees, steel-toed boots he'd bought at Goodwill for $12, T-shirt with a faded logo from a 5K race Nora had dragged him to 7 years ago, back when running for charity seemed like the worst thing that could happen on a Saturday morning. The dock work address led him to a warehouse district near the Columbia River where the air tasted like diesel and wet concrete. 18 men stood in a loose cluster near a loading bay, all of them wearing variations of Declan's outfit, all of them carrying the same expression of people who'd learned to expect nothing and still got disappointed. The foreman was 60 if he was a day face, like weathered leather voice like grinding gears. "Listen up. 6 trucks, 40 pallets each. Everything loaded by 2 p.m. or nobody gets paid. You got a problem with your back, your knees, or your work ethic, leave now." Nobody left. The work was exactly as brutal as Declan had anticipated, and somehow worse. Each pallet weighed between 800 and 1,200 pounds, required 2 men minimum, and the trucks had no loading ramps. Just a 4-foot vertical climb with straps and upper body strength and the knowledge that dropping a pallet meant starting over. By 8 a.m., Declan's hands were blistered. By 10, those blisters had popped and reformed. His shoulders screamed with every lift. His lower back sent shooting pains down his legs that made him wonder if permanent damage was being done in real time. The man working opposite him was maybe 25 tattoo sleeves and a missing front tooth. "First-time dock work?" Declan nodded, saving breath. "You'll get used to it, or your body breaks and you don't come back, usually one or the other by day 3. They worked in silence after that, a rhythm developing that was less coordination than mutual survival instinct. Lift, carry, climb, secure, repeat. Over and over until the movements became automatic and thought became a luxury neither could afford. During the lunch break, that wasn't really a break, just 20 minutes to eat whatever you'd brought and try to convince your muscles they could handle 4 more hours. Declan checked his phone. Text from Iris's school reminder. Field trip deposit due. Monday. $35. Text from the electric company. Final notice before disconnection. Text from Margaret Thorne. "Ms. Marlowe will see you at 6 p.m. Address 1500 Harbor Lane, Penthouse 4. Please be prompt." The absurdity of it crashed over him fresh. In 6 hours he'd go from loading pallets for $15 an hour to meeting a billionaire in a penthouse that probably had more square footage than the entire warehouse he was currently destroying his body inside. The afternoon stretched into eternity. Sometime around 1:30, Declan's vision started to blur at the edges. Dehydration or exhaustion or both. He'd brought 2 bottles of water that had been empty since 11. The thought of asking the foreman for a break felt like admitting defeat. The last pallet loaded at 1:57, 3 minutes to spare. The foreman counted out cash into each man's hand without ceremony or comment. 620s. Declan folded them into his wallet, bringing his total available funds to $209.17. Still catastrophically short of rent. Still drowning, just slower now. He made it to his car before his legs gave out, collapsing into the driver's seat with a groan that turned into a laugh that might have been crying. Everything hurt. His hands could barely grip the steering wheel. His shoulders felt like someone had replaced the muscles with broken glass. The clock on his dashboard read 2:14. 3 hours and 46 minutes until the meeting with Vivian Marlowe. Declan drove home on autopilot, every bump in the road sending fresh waves of pain through his abused body. The apartment was empty. Iris still at after-school care for another 2 hours. Small mercy. She didn't need to see him like this, moving like an old man at 42. The shower water ran hot enough to scald, and he let it standing under the spray until the cheap water heater gave up, and cold shocked him back to something resembling alertness. His hands shook as he dried off as he examined the damage in the bathroom mirror, blisters across both palms, bruises forming on his shoulders where pallets had rested wrong. dark circles under his eyes that seemed to have darkened further, like his body was advertising his exhaustion to anyone who looked. He couldn't show up to meet a CEO looking like this, but he also didn't have many options. The charcoal suit was still damp, still stained beyond salvation despite his attempts to clean it. Everything else he owned was worse. Declan dug through his closet until he found a pair of khaki pants that didn't have holes, a button-down shirt in navy blue that Nora had bought him for Christmas 5 years ago. The collar was frayed, but not obviously. The shoes were the same ones he'd worn yesterday, dried out but still bearing water stains. Presentable, barely. The kind of outfit that said, "I'm trying," without promising, "I'm succeeding." He picked up Iris at 4:30, and her face, when she saw him walk into the after-school program, nearly undid what little composure he'd managed to rebuild. "Daddy, you look tired." Not sad, not sick, tired. 7 years old and already learning to be diplomatic about disaster. "Had a long day at work, Bug. How was school?" She launched into a story about art class and a boy named Marcus who'd eaten paste and Miss Hartley had to call the nurse. Normal kid problems in a normal kid world where the worst thing that could happen was accidentally ingesting non-toxic adhesive. Declan listened and made appropriate sounds and tried not to calculate how many hours he'd have to work loading trucks to afford the field trip, deposit the insulin, the rent, the electricity, the endless parade of things that cost money he didn't have. "I have to go to another meeting tonight," he said when her story wound down. "Mrs. Palmer is going to watch you for a couple hours, Mrs." Palmer was the neighbor 3 doors down, 76 years old, and living on Social Security, who'd been watching Iris for free ever since Declan had fixed her leaking sink 6 months ago, the kind of trade economy that developed when everyone involved understood poverty intimately. Iris's face fell. "Another meeting. But you said we could watch a movie tonight." He had said that 2 days ago when hope was a thing that still made promises. "I know, sweetheart, I'm sorry. This one is important. It might help us." "Help us how?" The question was fair, and Declan had no good answer, so he went with honesty. "I don't know yet, but I have to try." Something in his voice must have convinced her, or maybe she was just too young to sustain anger at a father who was clearly already punishing himself. "Okay, but you owe me 2 movies. Deal." He dropped her at Mrs. Palmer's with her backpack and strict instructions about checking her blood sugar at 6:30 and administering insulin if she ate anything. Mrs. Palmer had done this routine 100 times, but Declan went through it anyway, the only control he had left in a world spinning beyond his grasp. The drive to the Pearl District took 20 minutes through rush-hour traffic. The buildings grew taller, sleeker, more expensive with each block. Restaurants with single entrees that cost more than Declan spent on groceries in a week. Boutiques selling clothes he couldn't afford to look at through the window. 1,500 Harbor Lane rose 42 stories, all glass and steel, and architectural statements about wealth. The parking garage charged $20 for the first hour. Declan circled twice before finding street parking 4 blocks away. His body protested every step of the walk back. The blisters on his hands had torn open again inside his pockets. His lower back felt like someone was driving a spike through his vertebrae with each footfall. The lobby was everything his apartment wasn't. Marble floors that reflected lights embedded in the ceiling. Abstract art that probably cost more than he'd made in the last 5 years. A security desk manned by someone in a suit nicer than anything Declan owned. "Can I help you?" The tone was polite and professional and left no doubt that Declan didn't belong here, that his presence was an aberration requiring explanation. "Declan Reed, I have a meeting with Vivian Marlowe, Penthouse 4. The security guard's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. He checked a tablet, scrolled, checked again. "ID, please." Declan handed over his driver's license, the photo from 4 years ago showing a man who looked like a distant relative of his current self. The guard compared face to photo with the skepticism of someone trained to spot imposters. Finally, a nod. "Take the elevator on the right. It only goes to the penthouse level. Ms. Marlowe is expecting you." The elevator was the kind with mirrors on 3 sides, forcing Declan to confront his reflection from multiple angles. The khakis had wrinkles he hadn't noticed at home. The shirt pulled slightly across his shoulders because warehouse work had built muscle in places dress shirts weren't designed to accommodate. His face was drawn, exhausted, the face of a man barely holding on. The penthouse level opened into a private hallway with exactly 2 doors. Before Declan could decide which to approach, one opened. The woman who emerged was in her early 60s, gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a cream blouse and black slacks that screamed quiet professionalism. "Mr. Reed, I'm Margaret Thorne. Please come in." The penthouse beyond defied every assumption Declan had built about billionaire living spaces. It wasn't ostentatious. No gold fixtures or crystal chandeliers or floor-to-ceiling windows showing off the view. Instead, it felt almost minimalist, clean lines, comfortable furniture, books lining one entire wall, art that looked chosen for love rather than investment. And sitting in a leather chair near the window, silhouetted against the Portland skyline, was the woman from the highway. Recognition slammed into Declan like a physical force. The beige trench coat was gone, replaced by a charcoal cardigan over a simple white blouse. Her hair was styled now silver and elegant, but the eyes were the same, and they looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite parse. She stood, and the movement was careful, deliberate. He noticed the cane leaning against her chair, noticed the way she favored her left side slightly. "Mr. Reed, thank you for coming." Her voice was different from yesterday, stronger now, carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. But underneath, he heard the same tremor of fear he'd heard on the highway. "Ma'am, I didn't realize. I didn't know who you were yesterday." A slight smile touched her lips. "I know. That's rather the point." She gestured to the chair across from hers. "Please sit. Would you like something to drink? Coffee, water?" His mouth was dust dry from 8 hours of manual labor. "Water would be good." Margaret appeared with a glass before he'd finished the sentence, the kind of efficient service that came from years of anticipating needs. The water was cold enough to hurt his teeth, filtered to perfection, everything the tap water in his apartment wasn't. Vivian settled back into her chair, studying him with an intensity that made Declan want to fidget. "I imagine you're confused about why you're here." "That's an understatement." "Fair enough. Let me start with an apology. Yesterday morning you sacrificed a job interview to help me. You ruined what I suspect was your only good suit. You arrived at Meridian soaking wet and were humiliated by Preston Blackwell because of it." The memory of Preston's contempt burned fresh. He was doing his job. I showed up looking unprofessional. He was being a sadistic ass. No hesitation, no corporate euphemism. And he's going to regret it. The words hung in the air, sharp-edged and promising consequences. Declan's confusion must have shown because Vivian leaned forward slightly. "I saw you this morning, Mr. Reed, on the highway. I watched you drive past me the first time." His stomach dropped. "I came back." "Yes, you did. Do you know how many cars passed me before you?" I counted. 246. Expensive cars. Cars driven by successful people on their way to important meetings. Not one stopped. And then you appeared in your Ford with the check engine light on, late for an interview that could have changed your life." She paused, and something shifted in her expression. Softness, maybe, or recognition. "You drove past, then you came back. Why?" The question felt like a trap or maybe a test. Declan reached for honesty because lies had never gotten him anywhere useful. "My wife used to say that if our daughter ever needed help, she'd want someone to stop. And you looked scared. I couldn't just leave you there." Vivian's eyes glistened slightly, catching the light from the window. "Your wife. Margaret mentioned you're a widower." 2.5 years. "I'm sorry. What was her name?" "Nora." The name still hurt to say out loud, still felt like an open wound that refused to heal. Vivian nodded slowly. "And your daughter Margaret said she has diabetes." How much had Margaret dug up? How thoroughly had he been investigated in the last 24 hours? "Type 1, she's 7, Iris." "That's a beautiful name." Vivian shifted in her chair and Declan caught a flash of pain across her face before she controlled it. "Mr. Reed, may I call you Declan?" "Of course." "Declan, I'm going to tell you something I haven't told my board, my employees, or anyone outside my immediate medical team and Margaret." She took a breath, and suddenly Declan understood why she'd seemed so frail on the highway, why she moved carefully, why there was a bottle of prescription medication on the side table he'd been trying not to stare at. "I have pancreatic cancer, stage 4. My oncologist gives me 4 months. 6, if I'm lucky and aggressive with treatment, which I'm not planning to be." The words landed like stones dropping into still water, creating ripples that spread outward into implications Declan wasn't ready to process. I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. There's nothing to say. It's a fact like gravity or taxes. Her tone was matter-of-fact, but her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her own water glass. I built Meridian Global from nothing 35 years ago. Started in a garage with a business loan I had no business getting and a supply chain idea that everyone said would fail. Pride crept into her voice, earned and undeniable. Today we employ 4,000 people. We're worth $6 billion. We're in 38 states. I did that. Me. No husband, no children, no family. Just me and my obsession with building something that mattered. She met Declan's eyes directly. And when I die, Preston Blackwell is going to gut it like a fish. He'll cut costs, fire people, maximize short-term profits for shareholders, and destroy everything that made Meridian special. Within 5 years, it'll be another soulless corporation that treats employees like line items on a spreadsheet. The bitterness in her voice could have stripped paint. I can't let that happen. But I don't have children to leave it to. I don't have a protege I've been grooming for decades. What I have is 4 months and a desperate need to find someone I can trust. Declan's mind raced ahead to the conclusion she was building toward, and it seemed impossible. Ma'am, I'm a warehouse coordinator. I haven't worked at an executive level in years. I don't— You stopped on the highway. The interruption was gentle but firm. When it cost you everything, when you knew it would destroy your chances, you stopped anyway. She reached for a folder on the side table, flipped it open. Inside were documents Declan recognized from his own resume information he'd submitted for yesterday's interview. You managed a $50 million supply chain at Vertex Corporation, 0 safety incidents in 8 years. You built a predictive analytics system that saved $12 million annually. You were being groomed for VP of operations before you quit to take care of your dying wife. Hearing his own accomplishments recited back felt surreal, like she was describing someone else, that Declan Reed belonged to a different lifetime. I didn't quit. I took family medical leave and they eliminated my position while I was gone. Vivian's expression hardened. Which is illegal but difficult to prove. Yes, I know. I also know you've been blackballed in the industry because your former boss spreads rumors that you were unreliable. The confirmation of what Declan had suspected for 2 years still hurt. The invisible walls that kept him locked in low-wage jobs despite his qualifications finally had a name. I don't understand what you want from me. Vivian closed the folder. I'm going to make you an offer, and I want you to really listen before you respond. Can you do that? Declan nodded, throat too tight for words. I'm offering you the position of Chief Operating Officer of Meridian Global Industries. Base salary $185,000. Signing bonus of $75,000 paid immediately. Full benefits including health insurance with a prescription plan that will cover your daughter's insulin at $5 per prescription. The numbers were so large they stopped meaning anything. Declan's brain couldn't process them, couldn't fit them into the reality where he'd loaded pallets for 8 hours to earn $120. There's more, Vivian continued. I'm establishing a trust to control the voting shares of Meridian after my death. 3 trustees, you, my attorney, Sarah Whitmore, and my current COO, Thomas Brennan. The 3 of you will have the power to make decisions about the company's direction to protect it from hostile takeovers or corporate raiders. She leaned forward and her voice dropped to something almost conspiratorial. I need someone with integrity, Declan. Someone who makes decisions based on what's right, not what's profitable. Someone who stopped on a highway in the rain because it was the decent thing to do. The room felt like it was spinning. Declan gripped the arms of his chair, trying to anchor himself to something solid. Why me? You must have dozens of qualified candidates, people with MBAs and connections, and I tested 5 candidates over the last 6 months. Vivian's voice was calm, final. I put myself in vulnerable situations to see who would help. 3 didn't notice me at all. 1 called 911 and drove away. You were the only one who sacrificed something meaningful to make sure I was safe. She pulled out another document, slid it across the coffee table between them. An employment contract thick with legalese. You start Monday. First thing you do is attend a board meeting where I'm going to announce your hiring and Preston's termination. Declan's head snapped up. You're firing him. I'm firing him. He's been embezzling through shell companies for 5 years. Approximately $18 million that I can prove. I've had forensic accountants working on it for 3 months. The satisfaction in her voice was cold and absolute. But why tell me all this? Why not just hire me and spring it on everyone? Because I need to know you understand what you're walking into. This isn't just a job, it's a responsibility. 4,000 people depend on Meridian for their livelihoods, their families, their futures. When I'm gone, you'll be partly responsible for protecting them. She paused and vulnerability crept into her expression for the first time. And because I need to know you can handle the pressure. In 4 months, maybe 6, I'll be dead. You'll have had almost no time to learn the business. The board will question your every decision. Preston will challenge the trust in court, claim I was mentally incompetent when I signed it. The weight of what she was offering crashed down on Declan like a collapsing building. This wasn't salvation. It was a test he'd spend the rest of his life trying to pass. I need time to think. You don't have time. Vivian's voice was gentle but implacable. Your rent is due tomorrow. Your daughter needs insulin you can't afford. The electric company is threatening to shut off your power. You're drowning, Declan. I'm throwing you a rope. How did she know about the electric bill? How deep had Margaret dug into his life? This feels like charity. Like you're saving me out of guilt. This is absolutely not charity. Steele returned to her voice. I'm offering you this position because you're qualified and because I believe you'll protect Meridian's soul when I'm gone. The fact that it also saves you from eviction is coincidental. She stood slower than she probably wanted, the cane providing support she clearly resented needing. I'm not asking you to decide right now. Go home, talk to your daughter, sleep on it. But Declan, I need an answer by tomorrow at noon. Margaret appeared as if summoned, holding a manila envelope. Vivian took it and handed it to Declan. Inside is a check for $10,000. Advance on your signing bonus. Use it for rent, for Iris's medication, for whatever you need. Consider it a gesture of good faith. Declan's hands shook as he took the envelope. $10,000. Enough to pay rent for 6 months. Enough to breathe for the first time in years. If I say no, do I have to return this? Vivian's smile was sad and knowing. If you say no, keep it anyway. Consider it payment for stopping on the highway and restoring my faith that decent people still exist. The generosity of it made his eyes sting. He stood legs protesting after hours of loading dock work, followed by sitting in a too comfortable chair. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you tell me who you were yesterday on the highway? Vivian moved to the window, looking out over Portland as the sun set behind the West Hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Because I needed to know what kind of man you were when there was nothing in it for you. When helping me cost you everything and you didn't know I had the power to give it back. She turned and the light behind her made it hard to read her expression. Character is what you do when no one important is watching, Declan. Everyone behaves well when there are consequences or rewards, but you stopped when it cost you everything and earned you nothing. The words settled into Declan's chest, heavy and true. I'll give you my answer by noon tomorrow. Margaret escorted him to the door. As it was closing, Vivian's voice called out one last time. Declan, whatever you decide, thank you for stopping. Most people wouldn't have. The elevator ride down felt dreamlike, unreal. In his hands was an envelope containing enough money to solve his immediate crisis. In his head was an offer that could change his entire life or destroy him with responsibility he wasn't ready for. The walk back to his car passed in a blur. 4 blocks that might have been 4 miles. His body ached from the loading dock, but his mind raced ahead, calculating possibilities and catastrophes in equal measure. He sat in the Ford for 10 minutes before starting the engine, staring at the envelope like it might explode. Finally, with hands that still trembled, he opened it. The check was real. $10,000 signed by Vivian Marlowe in handwriting that was steady and clear. No conditions listed. No strings attached in the memo line. Just, for stopping. Declan started the car and drove to Mrs. Palmer's apartment, the check burning a hole in his pocket like stolen money, even though it was freely given. Iris ran to him when he walked in, and her hug was fierce enough to hurt his abused muscles. He didn't care. He held on and breathed in the smell of her strawberry shampoo and let himself believe just for a moment that tomorrow might be different from yesterday. How was your meeting, Daddy? Mrs. Palmer was watching from her recliner, knowing eyes taking in his expression. It was interesting. I'll tell you about it at home, Bug. They said goodbye to Mrs. Palmer with promises to return her kindness soon somehow. The drive home was quiet, Iris chattering about her evening while Declan's mind spun through scenarios and outcomes and fears. After Iris was asleep, after her blood sugar was checked and her insulin administered, and the ritual of bedtime was complete, Declan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open and the check in front of him. He pulled up his bank account, balance $209.17. He opened a new search tab and typed, Vivian Marlowe, Meridian Global. The articles confirmed everything she'd told him. Business genius, self-made billionaire, reclusive, absent from recent public appearances. Speculation about health issues that the company refused to confirm or deny. One article from a business journal 3 months ago caught his attention. Sources inside Meridian report CEO. Marlowe has been increasingly focused on succession planning, unusual for someone who has previously shown no interest in retirement. She'd been planning this for months. The highway incident wasn't random. It was a test she'd designed specifically to find someone with the character she needed. Declan had passed a test he didn't know he was taking. His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. This is Sarah Whitmore, Ms. Marlowe's attorney. She asked me to reach out. If you have questions about the trust arrangement or the employment contract, I'm available to discuss. Anytime, day or night. Another text, this one from Margaret Thorne. Mr. Reed, I wanted to add my voice to Miss Marlowe's. I've worked for her for 20 years. I've never seen her trust anyone the way she's trusting you. Please consider carefully. The company needs someone like you. The weight of expectations was already crushing, and he hadn't even said yes yet. Declan looked around his apartment, at the water stain on the ceiling, at the second-hand furniture, at Iris's backpack by the door with the field trip permission slip he couldn't afford to sign. This life was killing him slowly. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in increments of dignity lost and opportunities missed and potential squandered. Vivian was offering him a rope, but ropes could hang you as easily as save you. He opened a new document on his laptop and started writing 2 lists. Reasons to say yes. Financial security. Iris's future. Health insurance. Meaningful work. Honoring Vivian's trust. Protecting 4,000 jobs. Reasons to say no. Overwhelming responsibility. No experience at that level in years. Will be challenged and questioned constantly. Preston will come after him. Might fail spectacularly. Might let everyone down. The yes column was longer, but the no column felt heavier. Declan saved the document and closed his laptop. Sleep felt impossible, but he needed to try. Tomorrow he'd give Vivian his answer, and either way his life would never be the same. He checked on Iris one more time before bed, watched her sleep with the innocence of someone who still believed fathers could fix anything. Tomorrow he'd have to decide if he was brave enough to try. Morning came with Iris standing beside his bed, small hand shaking his shoulder. Declan surfaced from dreams where he'd been drowning in paperwork while Vivian watched from a shore he couldn't reach. "Daddy, it's Saturday. You promised we'd make pancakes." The normalcy of the request, the simple childhood expectation that weekends meant pancakes, nearly broke him. He'd been so consumed with catastrophe that he'd forgotten to be her father in the ways that mattered. "You're right, Bug. Pancakes it is." They made them together in the cramped kitchen, Iris standing on a step stool to help mix the batter, getting flour on her nose and syrup on her shirt, and laughing when the first pancake came out shaped like a blob instead of a circle. For 30 minutes, Declan let himself exist in this moment, this kitchen, this small joy. Then Iris asked the question that shattered the illusion. "Daddy, are we still going to lose our home?" The spatula froze halfway to the griddle. How did she always know? How did 7 years cut through every careful lie he constructed? "No, sweetheart, we're not." "How come? Did you win the lottery?" "Close enough." "Something like that. I got some money to help us catch up on bills." Iris turned pancakes with the concentration of a surgeon tongue sticking out slightly. "From the fancy lady you met?" "Yes, from Ms. Marlowe." "Is she a fairy godmother?" The innocence of the question made Declan's chest ache. "She's a very successful businesswoman who needed help and wants to thank me. Miss Hartley says when something seems too good to be true, you should be careful." 7 years old and already suspicious of generosity. What kind of world taught children that kindness came with strings? "Sometimes good things happen to good people, Iris." She looked at him with those hazel eyes that missed nothing. "I hope so, Daddy. I really hope so." After breakfast, Declan drove to the bank. The teller's eyes widened when she saw the check amount, widened further when she ran it through verification, and it came back legitimate. $10,000 deposited into an account that had never held more than 4 digits. Available balance: $10, 209.17. The numbers on the receipt looked fake, photoshopped impossible. Next stop was the landlord's office. Brennan was in his mid-50s, balding perpetually, wearing khakis and golf shirts like he might be called to the course at any moment. He'd been reasonable about late payments until reasonable stopped being an option. "Declan, didn't expect to see you until the sheriff showed up Monday." No malice in the tone, just fact. Business was business. "I have the rent, and I want to pay 6 months in advance if you'll take it." Brennan's eyebrows climbed toward his receding hairline. 6 months. Declan pulled out his checkbook, the same one he'd used maybe twice in the last year, because everything was online now, and wrote a check for $10,950. 6 months at $18.25 each. Brennan stared at the check like it might sprout wings. "Did you rob a bank?" "Got a new job. A good one." "Must be damn good." Brennan pulled out a receipt book, filled it out in his careful accountant's handwriting. "This gets you through July. Rent's going up $50 in August, just so you know." Of course it was. Everything always went up. "That's fine. Thank you for being patient with me." Brennan's expression softened slightly. "You're a good father, Declan. I've seen a lot of tenants come through these units. Most of them would have given up, sent the kid to relatives, taken the easy way out. You kept fighting for her." The words hit harder than they should have. Declan shook his hand and left before emotion could overwhelm professional courtesy. Next was the pharmacy. The same one where they'd given him the emergency insulin supply, where the pharmacist knew Iris by name, because chronic illness made you a regular whether you wanted to be or not. "I need to fill Iris's prescription. The full 90-day supply." The pharmacist, a woman named Ruth, who'd shown more compassion than her corporate employer deserved, pulled up the account. "Insurance still isn't covering it. That'll be $660 for 3 months. Declan didn't flinch. "That's fine." Ruth's fingers paused over the keyboard. "You sure last time you could only afford 2 weeks?" "I'm sure." She processed the payment and handed over 3 months' worth of the medication that kept his daughter alive, and Declan felt wealthy in a way that had nothing to do with money. By the time he got home, it was almost 11. 1 hour until Vivian's deadline. Iris was watching cartoons, legs swinging from the couch, completely absorbed in animated characters, solving problems in 30 minutes minus commercials. Declan sat beside her, and she automatically leaned into him, head against his shoulder. "Bug, I need to talk to you about something important." The cartoons paused. When had she learned to read his tone well enough to know when serious conversations were coming? "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. The opposite. Remember how Daddy's been looking for a better job?" She nodded, solemn. "Well, I got offered one. A really good one. It would mean we have more money for things we need. You'd never have to worry about your medicine again. We could stay in our home, maybe even move somewhere nicer." Iris processed this with the gravity of someone 3 times her age. "What's the bad part?" The question knocked him sideways. "What makes you think there's a bad part?" "Because you look scared. Like when Mommy was sick and you had to tell me she wasn't getting better." The comparison stole his breath. He'd thought he'd hidden it better then. Apparently children saw everything. "The job is really important. A lot of people depend on it being done right, and I'm scared I might not be good enough." Iris turned to face him, fully small hands taking his much larger ones. "Daddy, you're good at everything." The faith in her voice was absolute, unearned, devastating. "What if I mess up? What if I let people down?" She thought about this seriously, like he'd posed a math problem requiring careful calculation. "Miss Hartley says brave people aren't people who aren't scared. Brave people are people who are scared, but do it anyway." The wisdom of elementary school teachers filtered through a 7-year-old's understanding, cutting straight to truth. "You're right. Miss Hartley is very smart. So you're going to take the job?" "I think I am. But it means I'll be working a lot, learning new things. I might be stressed sometimes." Iris hugged him, fierce and sudden. "That's okay. We'll figure it out together." The simple confidence of it, the assumption that they were a team facing challenges rather than a child depending on an adult, settled something in Declan's chest. He checked his watch. 11:40, 20 minutes until noon. "I need to make a phone call, Bug. Can you give me a few minutes?" She nodded and turned the cartoons back on, already dismissing him in the way kids did when they'd gotten what they needed. Declan went into his bedroom, closed the door, and pulled out the business card Margaret had given him with Vivian's private number. She answered on the first ring. "Declan, I have my answer. I'm listening." He took a breath, thought of Iris's faith, of Nora's voice telling him to do right by their daughter, of the man he used to be before grief and poverty had whittled him down to survival mode. "Yes, I'll take the position. I'll do everything I can to protect what you've built." Silence on the other end, long enough that Declan wondered if the call had dropped. Then Vivian's voice came back, thick with emotion she was clearly fighting to control. "Thank you. You can't know what this means to me. I'll probably screw up. I'll need a lot of help. I haven't worked at this level in years, and I was never COO of anything." "You'll have help. Thomas Brennan is COO, now genuinely good at his job and willing to mentor. I'll teach you everything I can in the time we have. And Declan, you're more qualified than you think. You just forgot because the world spent 2 years telling you otherwise." The validation hit like water after days in the desert. "What happens now?" "Now you enjoy your weekend. Monday morning, 9 a.m., report to Meridian Tower. Margaret will meet you in the lobby and get you settled. We have a board meeting at 10 where I'll make the announcement." "About Preston?" "About everything. Fair warning, it's going to be ugly. He won't go quietly, but I have evidence locked down tight enough that his lawyers will choke on it." The satisfaction in her voice was sharp-edged and final. "I'll be there." "Declan, one more thing. Wear whatever makes you comfortable. You don't need to perform wealth you don't have yet. These people will respect you for your work, not your wardrobe." The permission to be himself, to not pretend, loosened something he hadn't realized was clenched tight. "Thank you. For all of it. Thank me by protecting them when I'm gone. That's all the thanks I need." The call ended, and Declan sat on his bed holding a phone that had just transmitted the conversation that changed his life. The weekend passed in surreal slow motion. Saturday afternoon he took Iris to the park, pushed her on swings, watched her make friends with kids whose parents looked at his worn jeans and discount shoes and made assumptions about his worth. Let them. By Wednesday, those assumptions would be wrong. Saturday night, Iris asked for 2 movies since he'd promised, and they watched animated adventures until she fell asleep against his shoulder, mouth slightly open, completely trusting that her father would keep her safe. Sunday was harder. The reality of Monday's board meeting pressed down like physical weight. Declan spent the afternoon researching Meridian Global Reading, quarterly reports, studying organizational charts, trying to memorize names and divisions and metrics that would be his responsibility in less than 24 hours. Thomas Brennan, current COO, 58 years old, been with Meridian for 12 years. Reviews praised his operational excellence but noted he lacked Vivian's vision. Preston Blackwell, CFO, 46, Harvard, MB. A 5 years at Meridian. The embezzlement accusations weren't public, but Vivian's forensic accountants had built a case that would apparently destroy him. The board of directors, 12 people whose backgrounds screamed old money and East Coast connections. Lawyers, former executives, investors who'd been with Vivian since the early days. They were going to eat him alive. Sunday night, after Iris was asleep, Declan laid out his clothes for Monday. The khakis from the penthouse meeting, the navy shirt, the water-stained shoes. Vivian had said to be himself. This was all himself he had to offer. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by dreams where he stood before boardrooms full of people laughing, where Vivian collapsed mid-sentence and he had to take over without knowing what to say, where Iris asked why Daddy had failed, and he had no good answer. He woke at 5:30 Monday morning, heart-pounding sheets damp with sweat. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and Portland's distant traffic. Declan checked on Iris, found her sleeping peacefully, blood sugar monitor on her nightstand showing numbers in the safe range. He made coffee, showered, dressed in the outfit he'd chosen, looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and saw a man pretending to be ready for something he absolutely wasn't. Iris woke at 6:45, earlier than her school schedule required. "Big day, Daddy. Biggest day in a long time, bug." They had breakfast together, cereal, because pancakes required mental energy he couldn't spare. She chattered about a book report due Wednesday about Marcus from school, who'd stopped eating paste and graduated to eating erasers instead, about how Miss Hartley said erasers were actually made from rubber, which was basically plastic, so probably Marcus would survive. Normal kid concerns in a morning that felt anything but normal. Declan dropped Iris at school, hugged her longer than usual, and she pulled back with knowing eyes. "You're going to be great, Daddy. Miss Hartley says, I know. Brave people are scared, but do it anyway." She grinned, gap-toothed and beautiful. "See, you were paying attention." The drive to downtown Portland took 30 minutes through morning traffic. The Meridian Tower looked different now that Declan knew he belonged there, or at least was supposed to pretend he belonged. The glass facade reflected clouds and buildings and a world that moved fast while he'd been standing still. The parking garage still charged $20, but now it didn't matter. Small victories in a morning of overwhelming terror. Margaret met him in the lobby at 8:55 sharp, wearing a cream suit and an expression of warm professionalism. "Mr. Reed, welcome to your first day. Please call me Declan. Mr. Reed makes me sound like my father." A smile touched her lips. "Declan it is. We have a few minutes before the board meeting. Let me show you to your office." The elevator ride to the 52nd floor felt like ascending into another dimension. The executive level was all glass walls and expensive carpet and hushed tones that spoke of power concentrated in small spaces. Margaret led him past offices with names on plaques, past conference rooms where important meetings happened, to a corner office with a view that made his breath catch. Portland stretched out below. The Willamette River snaked through the city bridges connecting east to west, Mount Hood visible in the distance when the clouds cooperated. "This is yours. Ms. Marlowe wanted you to have the southern exposure. Better light." The office was easily 3 times the size of his apartment's living room. Desk made of some dark wood he couldn't identify. Leather chair that probably cost more than his monthly rent used to be. Bookshelves waiting to be filled. A smaller table with 4 chairs for meetings. "I don't belong here." The words escaped before he could stop them. Margaret turned expression understanding without being pitying. "Ms. Marlowe said you'd feel that way. She asked me to remind you that she didn't belong in a boardroom 35 years ago either. Nobody belongs anywhere until they claim it." The phone on his desk rang, internal line blinking. Margaret picked it up. "Yes, we're on our way." She hung up and straightened her jacket. "Board meeting starts in 5 minutes. Ready?" "Not even remotely." "Good. Overconfidence is dangerous. Healthy fear keeps you sharp." The boardroom was on the same floor, glass walls offering no privacy, everything visible to anyone walking past. 12 people were already seated around a table that could have hosted a small country's diplomatic negotiations. They looked up as Declan entered, and he watched their expressions cycle through confusion, assessment, and in a few cases poorly concealed disdain. Preston Blackwell sat near the head of the table, perfect hair and perfect suit and expression of someone who knew he controlled the room. His eyes locked on Declan, and something dangerous flickered there, recognition mixed with contempt. "Well, if it isn't the drowned rat from last week's interview, did you get lost on your way to the loading dock?" A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Others looked away. None of them defended Declan because why would they? He was nobody to them. Before Declan could respond, Vivian entered through the opposite door. She moved slower than she had at the penthouse, leaning more heavily on the cane, but her presence filled the space like she'd brought gravity with her. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned. "Good morning. Thank you all for making time on short notice." She took her seat at the head of the table, and Margaret placed a folder in front of her before retreating to stand against the wall. Vivian looked at Declan and gestured to the empty chair on her right. "Declan, please sit." The walk to that chair felt like crossing a battlefield under sniper fire. Preston's expression had shifted from contemptuous to confused. The board members murmured among themselves. Declan sat. The leather chair was expensive and uncomfortable, and positioned him as clearly allied with Vivian against whatever opposition was about to emerge. Vivian opened her folder. "I've called this meeting to announce several immediate changes to Meridian's executive structure." The murmuring stopped. Preston leaned forward, confidence still intact. "First, effective immediately, I'm terminating Preston Blackwell for cause." The silence that followed had weight and texture. Preston's face went from confident to confused to angry in 3 seconds flat. "Excuse me, you can't just—" "I can and I am. Over the past 5 years, you've embezzled approximately $18.4 million through shell companies and fraudulent vendor contracts." She slid a document across the table. "Forensic accounting report. Every transaction documented. Every shell company traced. The FBI has been briefed and will be here within the hour to take your statement." Preston stood so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "This is insane. I've done nothing but serve this company faithfully. If there are financial irregularities, they're accounting errors, not—" "Sit down, Preston." Vivian's voice could have cut diamonds. Preston sat, but rage twisted his features into something ugly. "The evidence is irrefutable. You've been stealing from Meridian, and by extension from every employee who depends on this company for their livelihood. Security will escort you from the building as soon as we're finished here." One of the board members, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair, cleared her throat. "Vivian, these are serious allegations. We'll need time to review." "You'll have all the time you need. The full report is being distributed to each of you after this meeting, but Preston's termination is effective now, not after committee review." She turned her attention back to the table at large. "Second, I'm appointing Declan Reed as Chief Operating Officer effective today." The explosion of voices was immediate and overlapping. Questions, objections, demands for explanation. Preston's voice rose above them all. "Him! You're replacing me with a warehouse worker. Have you lost your mind?" Vivian's hand came down on the table with surprising force. "I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 4 months to live. My mind is perfectly intact, which is more than I can say for your moral compass." The room went silent again. Several board members looked genuinely shocked. Others exchanged glances that suggested this confirmed rumors they'd been hearing. "I'm using the time I have left to ensure Meridian survives my death with its values intact. Declan has the experience, the integrity, and the judgment this company needs." Preston's laugh was bitter and sharp. "He failed an interview last week, showed up looking like he'd been sleeping under a bridge, and now you want to make him COO? This is madness, and everyone here knows it." Vivian met his eyes without flinching. "He failed that interview because he stopped to help me when my car broke down on Interstate 84. He sacrificed his professional future to ensure a stranger was safe. That's the kind of character I need protecting this company." She looked around the table, making eye contact with each board member. "Declan will have support. Thomas Brennan stays on as COO of Operations and will mentor. I'll work with Declan directly on strategic vision for as long as I'm able, but make no mistake, he has my full confidence and my full authority." One of the board members, a man whose nameplate read Richard Caldwell, leaned back in his chair. "Ms. Marlowe, with all due respect, Mr. Reed has no executive experience at this level. Dropping him into COO during a transition as significant as your succession seems unwise." Vivian opened this folder again and pulled out what looked like a resume. "Declan managed a $50 million supply chain at Vertex Corporation for 8 years. 0 safety incidents. Built analytic systems that saved $12 million annually. He left that position to care for his dying wife, not because he was incompetent." She slid the resume across the table. "He's more qualified than Preston ever was. He just doesn't have Preston's talent for self-promotion or embezzlement." Preston stood again, and this time security guards appeared in the doorway as if they'd been waiting for the cue. "This is illegal. I have contracts, employment agreements. I'll sue this company into the ground." "Please do." Vivian's smile was cold enough to frost glass. "Discovery will be fascinating for everyone involved." The guards moved forward. Preston looked around the table, searching for allies who weren't coming. "You're all witnessing elder abuse. She's dying medicated, not thinking clearly. This man," he pointed at Declan, "has manipulated a vulnerable woman for financial gain." Vivian's voice cut through his desperation like a blade. "I've been planning succession for 6 months. The trust documents were drafted before I ever met Declan. My oncologist will testify I'm mentally competent, and you, Preston, are going to prison." The security guards took his arms, not roughly but firmly. Preston wrenched free for a moment, turned back to the table. "Mark my words. This company will be destroyed within 6 months, and Reed will be the one holding the knife when it happens." Then he was gone, door closing behind him, and the security team's silence rushing in to fill the space his rage had occupied. Vivian closed her folder and looked at each board member in turn. "Questions?" The steel-haired woman spoke first. "What's the timeline for transition?" "I'll work directly with Declan for the next 3 months. After that, the trust takes over governance. The 3 trustees will make major strategic decisions by majority vote." Richard Caldwell frowned. "And if we have concerns about Mr. Reed's performance?" Then you bring them to me while I'm alive, or to the full board after I'm gone. But understand this, I chose Declan because he cares about people more than profits. That's not a bug. It's the feature I'm counting on. Another board member younger than the rest, maybe early 40s. Mr. Reed, do you have anything to say? Every eye turned to Declan. His mouth went dry. His hands clenched under the table where nobody could see them shake. He thought of Iris telling him about bravery, thought of Nora's voice saying character mattered more than credentials, thought of Vivian's faith in him unearned but absolute. I know I'm not who you expected. I know my background doesn't look like typical executive material, but I've spent 2 years watching good people get crushed by systems that value efficiency over humanity. I've loaded pallets next to single mothers working 2 jobs. I've seen what happens when corporations treat employees like numbers on spreadsheets. His voice steadied as he found the rhythm of truth. Vivian built Meridian with values that matter. I'm going to protect those values even if it costs profits. Especially if it costs profits. Because the 4,000 people who work here deserve a company that sees them as human beings, not assets to be optimized. The room stayed silent when he finished. Then the steel-haired woman nodded slowly. Well, at least he's honest. Richard Caldwell's frown deepened, but he didn't object. The younger member looked thoughtful. Vivian gathered her folder. We'll reconvene next week. Margaret will send the full forensic report this afternoon. Meeting adjourned. The board members filed out in 2s and 3s, voices low, expressions ranging from skeptical to cautiously intrigued. When the room finally emptied, only Vivian, Margaret, and Declan remained. Vivian sagged slightly in her chair, the performance of strength having cost more than she wanted to admit. Margaret moved to her side immediately, offering silent support. You did well. Vivian's voice was quieter now, stripped of the steel it had carried moments ago. I didn't do anything except let you fight my battles. You spoke your truth. That matters more than you know. She accepted Margaret's help to stand, movements careful and measured. Go to your office. Thomas will be by within the hour to start your orientation. The real work begins now. She paused at the doorway, turning back with effort. And Declan legacy isn't what you build. It's who you lift up. Remember that when the hard decisions come. Then she was gone. Margaret guiding her toward the private elevator, leaving Declan alone in a boardroom that still carried the echo of Preston's threats and promises of destruction. His phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. Enjoy it while it lasts. Read, I'm coming for everything you love, starting with that little girl of yours. PB. The threat was specific, personal, and crossed every line that separated business warfare from something darker. Declan's hands shook as he forwarded the text to Margaret with a single word, evidence. Her reply came within seconds. Screenshot saved, forwarding to FBI and our legal team. This just made his situation much worse. Declan walked back to his corner office, each step feeling both foreign and inevitable. The southern exposure flooded the space with morning light. Portland stretched below 4,000 lives depending on decisions he'd make from this chair, this desk, this impossible position he'd claimed by stopping on a highway in the rain. On his desk, Margaret had left a stack of folders labeled Read First, and a handwritten note in Vivian's elegant script. The hard part starts now, but hard doesn't mean impossible. It just means worth doing. 4 months to learn what took me 35 years to build. No pressure at all. VM. The last line held a hint of dark humor, an acknowledgement of the absurdity they both understood. Declan sat in the leather chair that was slowly becoming his and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Iris was in 2nd grade learning about fractions and the water cycle, completely unaware that her father had just stepped into a war he barely understood. Somewhere, Preston Blackwell was planning revenge that would make this morning's humiliation look gentle. Somewhere, Vivian Marlowe was counting down the days she had left, trusting that a stranger's character would be enough to protect everything she'd built. The weight of it all should have crushed him. Instead, Declan felt something unexpected rising in his chest. Not confidence exactly, not certainty, but purpose. The kind of purpose that comes from knowing that whatever happened next, he'd chosen the harder right over the easier wrong. Character is what you do when no one important is watching. Vivian had said that, but she'd been wrong about one thing. Someone was always watching. His daughter, his conscience, his wife's memory. and now 4,000 employees whose lives intersected with decisions he'd make from this chair. Declan opened the first folder and began to read, sunlight warming his shoulders, Portland humming below, the future uncertain, but his direction finally irrevocably clear. Whatever came next, he'd face it the same way he'd faced that woman on the highway, by stopping when it cost him everything, by helping when it made no sense, by choosing humanity over convenience. That was the lesson Vivian had taught him by testing him on Interstate 84. That was the legacy she was trusting him to carry forward. And for Iris, for Nora's memory, for the 4,000 people whose faces he didn't yet know, but whose futures now rested partly in his hands, Declan Reed would do everything in his power not to let them down. Even if it killed him. Especially if it killed him. Because some things were worth dying for. And protecting people who couldn't protect themselves had just become his life's work.